Most people think financial success is about making more money. But if that were true, many high-income professionals wouldn't feel trapped by their own lives. The real financial map of life isn't measured by how much money you earn. It's measured by the choices your money can still buy. And with every decade that passes, those choices quietly become more expensive. For most of your life, you've probably been taught to think about money in one way: earn more, save more, invest more. And on the surface, that advice makes sense. A student wants a higher salary. A young professional wants a bigger apartment. A parent wants financial security for their family. A retiree wants enough savings to live comfortably. Different goals, different ages. Yet they all seem to revolve around the same thing: money. But there is a problem with this way of thinking. It assumes that money is the goal itself. In reality, money has always been a tool. What people are truly chasing is freedom, security, flexibility, opportunity, and peace of mind. Money simply happens to be the currency used to purchase those things. The mistake is that most people spend decades focusing on the amount of money they have while paying very little attention to what that money allows them to do. And that distinction changes everything. The real issue is not how much money you make. It's how much choice you still have. Two people can earn the same income and own the same amount of assets, yet live completely different financial lives. One person can walk away from a toxic job, take 6 months off, start over, or care for a sick family member without panic. The other cannot. Not because they have less money, but because every dollar they earn is already committed to obligations they cannot escape. This is where most financial advice becomes incomplete. Money is not the destination, choice is. And as you move through life, something important begins to happen. Time slowly becomes more valuable, while mistakes become more expensive. The financial map of life is not a map of wealth. It's a map of how your ability to choose changes over time. This is Mind Over System, where we break down the systems and ideas that quietly shape the direction of your life. The first thing to understand is that your financial life is not one long game. It is a series of different games played on the same board. The mistake most people make is assuming that the rules never change. They do, and the cost of ignoring those changes can follow you for decades. Let's start with your 20s. This is the only period of life where you have very little money but an enormous amount of time. That combination is more valuable than most people realize. A 22-year-old can spend 2 years learning a difficult skill, fail in a business attempt, switch careers, move to another city, or start over from scratch. None of these decisions are painless, but they are usually survivable. The reason is simple. At this stage, time is abundant. You still have enough years ahead of you to recover from mistakes. Yet many people spend their 20s using money to buy things that create the illusion of success rather than the ability to create future success. A more expensive car, a more expensive phone, a more expensive lifestyle. What looks like a financial decision is often a time decision in disguise, because every dollar spent on appearances is a dollar not invested in skills, relationships, experiences, or opportunities that can expand future choices. The biggest asset in your 20s is not your income. It is your ability to recover. And every decision should be judged by a simple question. Does this increase my future options or reduce them? Then comes your 30s. This is where life starts demanding stability. Careers become more serious. Relationships become more serious. Responsibilities become more serious. Income often rises during this period, which creates a dangerous illusion. People assume that more income automatically means more freedom, but many discover the opposite. As income grows, obligations grow alongside it. A larger mortgage, a larger car payment, higher living expenses, more commitments that require the same paycheck to continue arriving every month. This is why some people earning six figures feel trapped, while others earning far less feel surprisingly free. The difference is not income, it is flexibility. Imagine two professionals earning exactly the same salary. One saves aggressively, keeps expenses manageable, and maintains room to maneuver. The other upgrades every aspect of life whenever income increases. 5 years later, both appear equally successful from the outside, but only one can afford to walk away from a bad situation. Only one can survive a layoff without panic. Only one has preserved the ability to choose. The purpose of money in your 30s is not simply to improve your lifestyle. It is to protect your options. Because every financial commitment you make today becomes a future obligation that demands your time tomorrow. Then comes your 40s and 50s. This is where the financial game changes again. Many people reach this stage with more money than they had in their 20s. Yet they often feel less free. Parents are aging. Children need support. Health issues begin appearing. Career competition becomes more intense. At this point, the problem is no longer a lack of opportunity. The problem is a lack of flexibility, a mistake that costs a 5-year-old. 2 years might cost a 50-year-old 10. A career change that feels exciting at 28 may feel terrifying at 48. Not because older people are less capable, because the margin for error becomes smaller. This is where people begin to discover the true purpose of wealth. Wealth is not about owning impressive things. Wealth is about creating room to respond when life becomes unpredictable. Consider someone who owns multiple properties but has almost no accessible cash. On paper, they appear wealthy. In reality, a medical emergency, a job loss, or a family crisis can immediately create stress. Why? Because assets alone do not create flexibility. Liquidity creates flexibility. Options create flexibility. The ability to absorb shocks creates flexibility. As you move through midlife, financial strength becomes less about maximizing gains and more about preventing irreversible losses. Because at this stage, protecting future choices becomes more important than chasing every possible opportunity. And finally, there is the last stage, your 60s and beyond. This is where many people realize something they spent decades ignoring. Money can buy comfort. Money can buy convenience. Money can solve many problems, but money cannot buy time. For most of life, people trade time for money. They work longer hours, take extra projects, delay rest, delay relationships, delay experiences, always believing there will be more time later. Then, one day, they discover that later has become limited. At this stage, the most valuable financial resource is no longer growth. It is time itself. Time with family, time with health, time with people who matter. Time spent on things that feel meaningful. This is also why the idea of legacy becomes important. Because eventually, every financial decision stops being about what money can do for you. and starts becoming about what it can do for the people who come after you, not simply through inheritance, but through knowledge, judgment, values, and the ability to make better decisions. The real financial map of life is not a journey from poor to rich. It is a journey from unlimited possibilities to increasingly limited choices. And the people who navigate it best understand one simple truth. Every dollar is ultimately a tool for managing time. The earlier you understand that, the better your decisions become. None of this is just theory. You can see the pattern almost everywhere. In your 20s, many people underestimate the value of learning because the rewards are delayed. Yet those who invest heavily in skills early often experience dramatically different career trajectories 10 years later. In their 30s, lifestyle inflation becomes one of the most common financial traps. As income rises, expenses rise with it. Larger homes, larger loans, and larger obligations quietly consume the flexibility that higher income was supposed to create. By midlife, the gap between wealth and financial security becomes visible. Some people own valuable assets but remain vulnerable to unexpected events because their money is locked away or dependent on continued work. And later in life, a different reality emerges. Surveys across countries consistently show that many retirees regret not how little they worked, but how long they postponed important parts of life while chasing financial goals. The pattern is remarkably consistent. People rarely suffer because they misunderstand money. More often, they suffer because they misunderstand time. And by the time they recognize the difference, one of those resources has become much harder to replace. Consider two people who both graduate at the age of 22. The first spends most of his 20s maximizing appearances, a nicer car, expensive gadgets, frequent upgrades whenever income increases. By the age of 35, he earns a respectable salary, but nearly every dollar is already assigned to monthly obligations. The second lives more modestly, not because he dislikes comfort, but because he sees money differently. He spends aggressively on skills, professional relationships, and opportunities that increase future earning power. As his income grows, his lifestyle grows more slowly. From the outside, the first person appears more successful for many years. Then life happens. A company restructures, an industry changes, a family emergency appears. Suddenly, flexibility becomes more important than status. At 45, the first person cannot afford to stop. Every major expense depends on the next paycheck arriving on time. The second person faces the same uncertainty, but with a crucial advantage. He has room to adapt. He can change careers, take time off, relocate, or support his family without immediately entering financial crisis. Both earned money. Both worked hard. But they used money to buy different things. One used it to buy a lifestyle. The other used it to buy options. And over time, the value of those options became greater than the value of the lifestyle itself. But this becomes much bigger than personal finance. Because over time, money doesn't just determine what you can buy. It determines what you can walk away from. A bad job, a toxic environment, a city you no longer want to live in, a life that no longer fits who you've become. The problem is that many people spend decades increasing their income while quietly reducing their freedom. Every new obligation demands a piece of their future time, a larger mortgage, a larger lifestyle, more expenses that cannot easily be reversed. From the outside, this looks like progress. But underneath, something else is happening. Their room to maneuver is shrinking. And that's what makes financial mistakes so dangerous later in life. It's not that losing money becomes more painful. It's that losing options becomes more expensive. At 25, a wrong decision can cost you money. At 55, the same decision can cost you years. And unlike money, years cannot be earned back. That's why the real financial risk is not running out of money. It's reaching a stage of life where you no longer have enough freedom to change direction. The uncomfortable truth is that most people spend their lives chasing money when they are actually chasing something else. A young person wants money because it creates opportunity. A parent wants money because it creates security. An older person wants money because it creates peace of mind. The money changes form, but the goal remains the same: choice. The ability to decide where to live, what work to do, who to spend time with, and how to respond when life changes unexpectedly. This is why financial success is often misunderstood. Many people look wealthy but have very little freedom. Others may not look impressive at all, yet they control their time, their decisions, and their future. The difference is not the amount of money they have. It is the amount of choice their money has preserved. In the end, the financial map of life is not really a map of wealth. It is a map of options. And every financial decision you make today is quietly determining how many of those options will still exist tomorrow. Perhaps the goal is not to obsess over every dollar. And perhaps it is not to constantly compare your financial position to someone else's. A better question might be this: what is your money helping you keep? More status or more choice? Because every stage of life asks for something different. At one point, money helps you take risks. Later, it helps you absorb shocks. Eventually, it helps you protect what matters most. The people who navigate this journey well are not necessarily the ones who earn the most. They are the ones who understand what money is for at each stage of life, not as a scorecard, not as proof of success, but as a tool that gives them the ability to respond when life inevitably changes. The financial map of life is not hidden. Most people simply spend too much time looking at the money and not enough time looking at what the money is buying. Because one day, the question will no longer be how much you earned. It will be whether your years of work created more freedom or more obligations. Whether your money expanded your choices or quietly narrowed them. And when you look at your own life today, perhaps the most important question is not, how much money do I have? But rather, what choices will my money still allow me to make 10 years from now?